I had never had a dream about my grandfather before.
Right.
And he, he was just watching the Yankee game, and he grabbed my hand as I walked into the room, and I could feel his hand, the exact way his skin felt. He always had the softest hands, and I felt, and he just walked me around him and sat me down on his lap, and we held hands. We said nothing, and I was just infused with this overwhelming sense of well-being and peace and love, and that was all I needed. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. It was extraordinary.
And that's a spiritual experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they happen to 40 to 50% of the population in the United States and Great Britain. But a lot of people don't talk about them for the very reason that you said people think I'm crazy.
Welcome to Permission to Heal. I am Marcy Brockman, and I am thrilled that you are here today. Today I have had the privilege of speaking with Karen Herrick. Reverend Karen Herrick, Ph.D., is the director of the Center for Children of Alcoholics in Red Bank, New Jersey. After a master's degree in social work, she originally began to educate families on the disease concept of alcoholism. Dr. Herrick developed a successful practice, eventually seeing all types of people with psychological problems, including addictions. She wrote her book, You're Not Finished Yet, which encapsulates her private practice work plus an additional 2 chapters on spirituality and spiritual experiences after she had a Holy Spirit experience during a holotropic breathwork training. She completed her Ph.D. and wrote her thesis on naming spiritual experiences. During her therapeutic practice, she encourages some clients to visit with mediums to aid in handling their grief and the loss of their loved ones. And we talk quite a bit about psychics. I shared my visit to the psychic that my deceased mom, arranged for me to go on, and it completely changed the course of my mental health journey after she died. It absolutely halted the guilt and overwhelming grief that I felt after her death, and really put me on much better footing and a much more spiritually peaceful footing as I continued my health journey and my mental health journey, and I continued to improve myself as a human being and as a mom and as a teacher and as a daughter and everything. she is working to get the term sane hallucinations into the world of psychology so that people will understand that healthy people have experiences seeing their deceased loved ones and that they're not abnormal. I think that that's an important thing. She wrote a book called You're Not Finished Yet. Another one, You're Not Finished Yet, Grandma, What is the Soul? And the Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal. And they're both available through Amazon.com and Kindle and her office, etc. And the Psychology of the Soul and Paranormal is also available on Audible. I am going to get it on Audible. I love audiobooks. So I hope you enjoy this conversation that Karen, Herrick, and I have. We also talked about the three realities, and we talked about Carl Jung and William James, and we talked about synchronicities of life, of thought. We talked about what people who are children of dysfunctional families, alcoholics, addicts, families or from within households where they didn't feel safe and they weren't getting the emotional support and the emotional needs that they have, and that there are groups that they can go to, Al-Anon and Alcoa and adult children of alcoholics and so on. And there is a lot to be said for joining like-minded people in community, whether that's through Zoom or that's in physical spaces. We gain so much from the connection of community with other people. We learn that we are not alone in our internal monologue of crazy thoughts that go through our heads. We are not alone in any aspect. So many of us have similar experiences, and just knowing that they're out there and that you are lovable and you are connected, and it brings hope into your life in a way that nothing else can, and helps create the compassion and empathy and love, and brings meaning to our lives that we are all craving, every single one of us. So quite a bit of this is quite, I don't know what the hell I was saying. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did, and you get, thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoy this episode as much as I think you do or will, please leave us a 5-star review. Please write a review. Please share this episode and the podcast with your friends, your family, your coworkers, anybody you meet who you feel that this could be of benefit or inspiration to. And please, I strongly ask you to consider becoming a Patreon subscriber of Permission to Heal podcast. I am a one-woman show. I do everything myself to keep the budget down. I find all of the guests. I do all the scheduling. I do all the research. I read their books. I do all the interviews themselves and all the tech, all the editing, all the sound and video editing, all the marketing, all of the graphic design, all the marketing. I do all of it myself. And it costs a little bit of money each week to put the podcast out. But I am so driven by this mission to create a community that helps build empathy and helps build compassion and self-compassion. I'm a firm believer that we sometimes need to be reminded that it's up to us how we live our lives. We have, this one shot at this iteration of our life on Earth, and it is up to us what we do with it. You get to paint and create your own reality, and you don't need anybody else's damn permission to do it. You want to go on a vacation, you want to learn how to paint, you want to take up French classes, you want to eat pasta for dinner, you want to sit in front of the TV and play video games for 75 hours. Whatever it is that you want to do with your life, with your time, with your gifts, with your few decades on this, or many decades on this planet, is 100% up to you. You get to decide. It's your permission is all you need. And, I say every episode, you only need your own permission to begin. So go forth and live the life that brings you love, joy, and meaning. I love you all. Thank you so much for listening. Now here's the episode. Welcome to Permission to Heal. I am Marcy Brockman. I am thrilled that you are here. And today I have the privilege of chatting with Dr. Karen Herrick. Lovely to see you, Karen. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's nice to see you too.
Nice to see you as well. When I was compiling all the bio information and info about your books and all the things that you've done, I kept coming up with questions, more things I wanted to talk about. But I think that we're going to not have an end of things to discuss, which is a good thing. So let's get to the 6 quick questions first, and then we'll just launch in, because I know once I start, there you go. So what 6 words would you use to describe yourself?
Let's see. I wrote down quickly, responsible,
Okay.
honest, humorous, friendly, and kind.
All great words. All great words. What is your favorite way to spend a day?
My favorite way to spend the day is in the garden, walking my dog, and maybe seeing a movie later, and then reading a book.
Okay. What kind of things do you grow in your garden?
Mostly flowers. I do have a lemon bush in New Jersey, and I just brought it in right now, and I have like 10 lemons. The poor bush is like the Charlie Brown Christmas tree, but I have beautiful lemons. So, but mostly I grow flowers.
Nice. What kind of dog do you have?
I have a standard poodle who is a party poodle. They call that in America, but it's in France, it's partey, meaning she's 2 colors. She's black and white.
Really? I'm not sure I've ever seen that before.
I know most people haven't. The party people say that's how that was in the beginning, but I don't know that much about dogs. I just thought she was pretty.
That's good enough. What's her name?
Her name is Emma.
Emma. I like.
She's named after Carl Jung's wife.
Oh.
Was Emma.
Okay. I did not know that.
And he's my favorite psychologist. So
I think I gleaned that from doing research on you.
Right.
We've got a Jungian among us.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just edit that out. What is your favorite childhood memory?
Oh, let's see. Probably going to my grandmother's farm in Kinderhook, New York, which is upstate New York, below Albany. Mm-hmm. And she had a horse and chickens and all kinds of different things.
Nice. Were there a lot of other grandkids, or is it just you?
I was the oldest grandchild, and I was the girl, and she had 2 boys, so she rather favored me.
Nice.
So that was nice.
That's very cool. I like that. What's your favorite meal?
My favorite meal is eggplant. I love eggplant anyway.
Really?
Wow.
I'm very particular with the eggplant. It's got to be, I don't have that much experience with it, but my mother used to make this. I haven't thought about this in a very long time. This eggplant dip. She used to dip vegetables in, or crackers or something.
Yes.
I remember seeing the eggplant halved in tinfoil and sort of resting on top of the burner and the stove, and she would sort of roast it on the stovetop. I haven't thought about that in 40 years. Wow. There you go. I'm going to have to try that. Maybe I'll set the house on fire. That would be good.
You can also do it in the oven.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. Okay, number 5. What one piece of advice would you like to give your younger self?
Let's see. Not to worry so much.
Yeah, I think a lot of us worry too much and overthink things, and they're never as complicated as we make them out to be in our heads.
Never.
Makes a lot of sense.
And we're so creative. We think of things that would never happen.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, yeah. To say them out loud, even, just is preposterous, you know? Like, even this morning, I was thinking something, and I don't even remember what it was, but whatever it was, it had me next to tears. And I remember saying it out loud, and I realized it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense. I think maybe I was half asleep. I don't know. I would like to think I was half asleep. Number 6. What is one thing you would most like to change about the world?
Oh, wow.
Not an easy
Um,
question.
People taking more responsibility for themselves because it seems like they are not now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Taking responsibility and being accountable for the things that
Yes.
they say and they do. Yeah. I'm seeing a big shift. I've been teaching for 27 years, and a lot has changed in the 27 years among the teenagers and among their parents. And I think that that's one of them. You know, they are not, they feel like somehow they are exempt from being accountable. And I don't know what the cause of that is. Could be the internet, the anonymity of saying things on the internet, could be a whole lot of things. I don't know. It's above
Right.
my, I think it's above my pay grade. I'm not sure. Okay. So you are, if I get this correctly, the, it's hard to see without the glasses on. The director for the Center of Children of Alcoholics in Red Bank, New Jersey. Is that true?
Mhm.
Yes. Very cool. I have my husband comes from a long line of alcoholics and had to nip that in the bud himself. And my mom was an opiate addict, and that's evidently, you know, at the end of her life, that's what killed her. They said congestive heart failure, but that's not really what it was. And I think that having grown up, I was an only child, and having grown up as the only child of an addict and of an undiagnosed bipolar and her host of issues, created a certain pattern or template in how I grew up and conducted relationships in my own life. And what I'm learning as I've been trying to untangle all of those webs is that, you know, being a people pleaser and all that entails, feeling like I was responsible for her problems, or that I was responsible for everybody solving everybody's problems, I think is pretty typical in children of addicted parents. Am I right?
To be a people pleaser, yes. Because in that way, maybe you're not going to get, knocked across the room or punished, overly punished in some way.
Right. Yeah, I felt like when I started piecing it together in my adulthood, like why I behaved that way, or why I was choosing relationships, choosing to run my relationships that way, and making myself crazy and resentful in the process, um, I started to realize that that was really the only way that I could perceive to feel safe. You know,
Mhm.
if I could make my mother happy, like that was my at 8 years old, like that was in my capability anyway. Not really. You know, if I could make my mother happy, then she wouldn't yell, she wouldn't, you know, make me feel unsafe in all
Right.
of those ways. And so I sort of translated all of that into my adolescent and adult relationships as well, because it was sort of the only way I knew how to be.
Mhm.
Crazy, what we all do. So before we get too involved, tell me about you. What was young Karen like? What were your circumstances that led you to become the beautiful woman I see in front of me?
Well, I was raised in an alcoholic family. My father was alcoholic. I was the oldest of three children. I was 4.5 years older than my brother, and then my other brother was 11 months after him. So they
Okay.
were more like twins. Um, was raised in upstate New York. I graduated high school at 16. And my father didn't believe in educating women, but even he knew he couldn't put me out in the world at 16. So I was sent to secretarial school, which was good.
Okay.
And so I still have those skills, and I type over 100 words a minute, which is helpful.
Wow. Yeah.
And I got married. I got pregnant and married in that order. because you had to get out of the house at 18, and nobody told you how you were going to do that. So I fell in love with my high school sweetheart, and we got married. And he went in the Navy, and then I went to California to wait for him, and so had my first daughter there. He got out of the Navy. We go back to New York. We go back to California, and I have a second daughter. I go to work. He goes to college. So that marriage lasted about, I don't know, 10, 12 years, because I had more of a goal of, come on, let's get successful here. And
Right.
he was very relaxed. So what I learned from all that was I was used to drama. I was used to chaos, and somebody that was very relaxed looked very depressed to me. And
Okay.
so then I married for the second time eventually, and I had my third daughter, and he was my alcoholic. And I always said if I ever married an alcoholic, I would do exactly the opposite of what my mother did. So eventually I realized I had
What
to leave that
what did
marriage.
your
She
mother do? She stayed?
stayed. Mhm.
Okay.
And then everything was what your father says. And I'm thinking, why are we listening to him? Because, he doesn't even, he's drunk most of the time.
Right.
So anyway, oh, I'm sorry about this. Um, and so then I decided, I had started a little bit of college, and what am I going to do with it? I don't know how to turn it off. So
Shove it in a drawer.
that's right.
Nice.
So I went to a women's center at a local college, and I said, I don't know whether I'm going to get divorced. I don't know whether I should go back to work, or because I could get a job, or if I should go to college, which was always my dream.
Mm-hmm.
So they put me in this room with all these pictures of women around on the walls that I'd never seen before. And the first question was, if you had all the money in the world and all the time, what would you do? So I put go to college. And then 45 minutes later, after answering all these questions, the last thing said, go back to number one and do it anyway.
Wow.
So, so I did.
Good for
So
you.
I got my bachelor's in art with art therapy, which was sales psychology and art were the things that I studied. And then they said, well, you can't eat on this art therapy degree, and I thought, you can't. And then so I decided to go to Rutgers and get a master's in social work, because I had gone to some art therapists and said, what kind of master's would you get? And they
Okay.
said, get a master's in social work, and you can, use your art therapy, you can use anything. And so then I had a private practice eventually, where I happened to come into this right when the adult child of alcoholic movement was starting in California.
Okay.
And I had a 12-year-old daughter who had an alcoholic father and a therapist for a mother. So I thought, maybe I'll go to this first conference. She can go to a group with teenagers and learn about alcoholism, because she was in denial. And I can go and learn about adult children of alcoholics. And I came back, and I had happened to have been dating a guy that worked in the alcohol field, and he wanted to start some workshops. And I said, I took all these notes. This movement is really going to go, and I'll give you 6 workshops, and I bet people will come. So we planned a brochure at a local church and started in the fall. And the first night, 95 people came.
Wow.
The second week, 129. It just grew. And
Wow.
then I went to a local college and gave these same lectures, and say I had 29 people in my class. 29 people came into my private practice. And
That's
I
great.
thought that's how it was. No. So anyway, eventually I had to decide how I was going to get more clients, but that's how it worked. And I've been doing that. And then people started telling me, because I worked with addicts and alcoholics and drug addicts, they would tell me these spiritual stories about, things happening to them that were really weird. And then I started taking some training in holotropic breathwork, which you lay down and you breathe to music, and it activates your chakra system. And so when I did that, I felt another breath inside of me, and it was crazy. But when I got up from that, I knew there was a God, and I didn't know what
Wow.
happened to me. But all the people that were at the conference with me, I knew we were all connected, and I knew we were connected to everybody on earth. And
Wow.
I just felt this awe, and just, it was wonderful when I think about it.
What
And
an
then you had to go
experience.
and you had to draw in a mandala, because it was very Jungian. You had to draw what happened. Well, you just drew. They didn't say draw what happened. And I drew a flower and sun and grass, and then we went to lunch. Well, I
All of
thought
that
I had
before lunch, huh?
all that before lunch. So I thought I had been on that blanket for 20 minutes, and I actually had been there for 4 hours.
Wow.
So I had a breathwork experience where eventually I realized the Holy Spirit had come through me, and I pulled my legs up. I was laying there, and the breath went right through my vagina and out my mouth.
Huh.
So I thought, I'm a channel. This is a channel. And then I thought, whose breath is that? And then they had said, don't think, just breathe. So I just said, don't think, just keep breathing. So I breathed, and the breath breathes with me, and then I knew there was a God.
Wow.
I know. And then I started getting clients with really different experiences, what we would call, spiritual experiences, but also very weird experiences where they thought they were crazy, and I was capable of telling them they weren't crazy. And that then I had to learn more about different types of spiritual experiences. Then I decided to get a doctorate, and my thesis
Talk
was
about
on
going to college.
naming spiritual experiences. So I got that, and then I've written, the last book was The Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal, which
Right.
talks about that we have a physical body and a spiritual body.
Can you explain that?
Sure. It's very simple. When
I'm
you're
confused by
born,
that.
I know. Well, St. Paul in the Bible says we come in on the spiritual, on the physical, and we leave on the spiritual.
Well, that makes sense to me.
Okay. So anyway, when you're conceived, basically an atom is placed in utero, and around that atom, your physical body grows. And the atom also grows, and that is your spiritual body. So you have this miniature of you that is growing along with the physical body. Now, that's very nice. Normally, that's called your astral body.
Mm-hmm.
It can leave, and I believe it leaves up the vagus nerve silver cord, which is the 10th and longest nerve in your body, is the vagus nerve.
Yes.
And it usually leaves up the top of your head. And the only purpose of your spiritual body is take your soul to the other side when you die. However, now we have people that have out of body experiences that leave their body.
Mm-hmm.
We have people that have near death experiences that go up and see their grandmother or their mother or whoever,
Mm-hmm.
and they come back in, and they know what it's like to have been there, and they're not afraid of death anymore.
Right.
So knowing that you have two bodies, I think, is very important. Also knowing that we live in this metaphysical system of, we have three realities. So first is the sensory reality, where you and I are talking now,
Okay.
and we made this date and we're here. The second reality is the clairvoyant reality, where things like meditation, telepathy, premonitions, different types of spiritual things happen to you. The third is what I call the transpsychic reality, which is where miracles happen, where people are cured from cancer, or you pray and, and maybe a spirit breath goes through you, that kind of thing. So there's those three different realities. William James and Carl Jung both believed they are our spiritual and psychological ancestors, that we lived in these three realities. Okay, so then how would an average person go from the sensory reality into the clairvoyant reality, you might ask, right?
Okay. I'll
Okay.
ask that. How does the
Okay.
person get there from one to the other?
So it's a couple of ways. So you could go to an astrologer, you can go to a numerologist, you could go to a tarot reader, to an I Ching reader, you could go to a psychic or a medium. Now, you make that appointment in the sensory reality. You're usually going for one of these readings because you have a question or you have a problem.
I have a story. Yes.
Okay, good. So you go, and it seems like the information is coming from the sensory reality. Whereas actually, all of these people are pulling from the clairvoyant reality, or the paranormal, from your unconscious, the medium's unconscious, the card reader's unconscious, your unconscious, and you get possibilities that you would never have thought of if you hadn't made this appointment and gone.
Right.
And usually people leave knowing something that they didn't know before, and they're happier. And they don't know why they're happier necessarily when they leave there. But in the clairvoyant reality, you are really in the now, in right here. The sensory reality is the past, present, and future. And all of us can see what's going on in the sensory reality. In the clairvoyant reality, usually only one person sees or feels.
Okay.
And usually you get the feelings of, I know I've gone to, a psychic, and I'll be driving home and I'll be thinking, Karen, you don't know that half of what she says is going to come true. Why do you feel so good?
Right.
But I do. I feel
Right.
good. I'm happy. My question has been answered. And I really have come up with different possibilities in my life as a result of having these many types of readings.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, shortly after my mom died. Now, I was raised Jewish, but in a very traditional sort of, I don't want to say traditional, but sort of we celebrated holidays and we were all together, but we weren't particularly religious. And from the time, I guess, from the mid 80s on, we really didn't belong to any particular synagogue. So we weren't particularly devout, let's just put it that way.
Right.
But my own sense of my own cosmology was really more leaning towards like a hard science atheist. Like you die, you're put in a box, that's the end of it. I wasn't really comfortable with that, but I wasn't really comfortable thinking about God in the way that my grandfather imagined him to be, a wizened old bearded guy with a gigantic tablet up in the heavens. That worked for him, didn't work for me. Anyway, so fast forward a bunch of years, now my mother died, and I was having trouble coming to terms with the grief of that, for many reasons. And I was on my way driving to school one day, and out of the blue, I thought, I need to call a psychic. And this was not something I would have ever thought to do before. And I got to school, and the minute I had 5 free minutes, I Googled Long Island psychics, and I found this woman named Dawn Jolie right in Smithtown, which is not that far from me. And I liked her webpage, and I liked her face on her webpage. She looked like somebody my mom would have been friends with. And I called her office to make an appointment, and her receptionist said, normally we book 6, 7, 8 weeks in advance, but I have an opening for tonight at 5:30. Do you want to come? Sure.
Synchronicity.
Right? So she knew my first name was Marcy. She knew nothing else. She had my phone number, and I said, I'll see you at 5:30 and I'm going to pay cash. And I walk in, and Dawn herself opens the door. Hi, Marcy. How are you? I'm so glad to see you. Your mom and your grandma are already here. Come inside and chat with us. And I was like, right. What the hell are you talking about?
Right.
So I walk in and I sit down, and she's got all these like fuzzy yellow, velvet Elvis posters on the wall. She's a big Elvis fan. And she explains her process. And I sat down on the couch, and there was a big tissue box in front of me. And within a second, she starts talking to my mom, and she's like, stop yelling at me. I can hear you. She's like, your mom just recently died, didn't she? Because the recently dead always shout because they don't think that they can be heard. Okay. So from this, I said nothing. She knew that I was divorced. She knew that I had a son who was into science and math. She knew that I had a daughter who was an artist. She knew why I got divorced. She knew that my mom and I had had a bad falling out over my mother's drug addiction, and that I had cut my mother out of our lives 18 months before my mother died, so that I could not only save myself from that toxicity, but stop the intergenerationality of the mental illness and the addiction from affecting my kids, because she started terrifying them with her drug addicted brain. And I felt when she died, not only sad that my mother was dead, but terribly guilty that I hadn't been with her or that I had walked out on her, like all this stuff.
Right.
And
Right.
and so Dawn said, your mom wants you to know that you were right to do what you did, that she wouldn't have had the courage to do what you did. You were a better mother than she ever could be, that she's sorry she wasn't everything that you needed, but that you need to let go of the guilt and be proud of yourself for being the mom that you are. And then she says, she looks at me and she says, does that make sense to you? And I'm bawling, tears and snot everywhere, like ugly crying all over. And it was exactly what I needed to hear.
Right.
And there was no way, like people say, oh, she's a fraud, but she's not. There was no way you could have Googled that. I Google myself regularly,
Right.
just to see what my digital footprint is. And none of that information is there.
Right.
She, heard stuff. My grandmother was talking and my mom was talking, and she just knew stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of details of stuff that would be impossible for her to know. And I left there feeling happier and calmer and more relaxed and more at peace than I had felt in years.
I know.
It was absolutely amazing. And then afterward, I guess because I was more in tuned, I realized that she was in my house. I was alone. It was a Sunday night. My kids were with their dad. And a toilet on the second floor of my house flushed. And my mom had Crohn's disease in her earthly life. So if there's one household sound that I would associate with my mom, it's a toilet flushing. Sorry, it's totally the truth. And I heard the toilet flush and I went, gee, that's interesting. And I felt like this heat just go down the stairs, around the room, through me and out the back door of the house. And I was like, oh, hi, Mom. Nice of you to stay, And I kept having experiences like that and dreams where I would actually feel the hair on the back of my neck moving. I would feel her kiss the back of my neck the way she used to, because she was a little taller than I am. And I just knew she was there. I never actually physically saw her, but I felt her. I smelled her perfume. I knew she was there. And it was always so insanely comforting. And I sometimes, you're one of the only people who've looked at me and said, yes, of course, this is true. This is what you've said. But most people think I'm crazy.
Well, yeah, that's what I hope to teach, that this is really part of life, and especially when you've lost someone, and most people have guilt for about something when they lose a loved one, or I couldn't help them enough.
That gets unsaid. Yeah.
I couldn't help them enough and all that. So if we just knew that there was life everlasting, which most religions say there is, but they don't explain that. Right. Spiritualism was a religion. It still is a religion. About 1% of Americans are spiritualists now, but in the 1850s to like 1900, like 20% of the population were spiritualists, because they would go to seances, and because
that was big then.
The Civil War, everybody lost somebody, and they were trying to find their loved ones. So they did a lot. We have a lot of research from then, and a lot of stories, and things like what happened to you, like Mom kind of walking through you, or you walking through her. There happens to be a new show on CBS on Thursday nights. I think it's 9:00. It's called Ghosts. Okay. It is. I watched it. It's only been on 2 weeks. So I watched it last week in my daughter's house in Nevada, where I was on vacation. Crazy. I thought, oh my God, they made it crazy. There's too many ghosts, in my opinion. But as we watch it, we'll all get to know each ghost. And this young couple she has inherited this house, and she wants to make a bed and breakfast out of it. And she can't see the ghost until in the first session, she falls down 2 flights of stairs and hits her head and is in a coma. And then when she comes back, which happens if you hit your head, she can see the ghost. And so the second story is how attached she's already.
Let me just say this to my listeners: don't go out and hit yourself in the head on purpose.
Right. But it's a funny story, and understand it's from a British film. Okay. And that in Britain there is a story of like that. For instance, they have a caveman. We have a Viking guy. but they have similar characters. So they've taken it,
Interesting.
I think, from the British comedy. And of course, in Britain, they have spiritualist churches and people who do go and you know, and get receive messages.
Huh.
But in the clairvoyant reality, this happens. And your loved ones want to talk to you. Your mom wanted you to know you shouldn't feel
Yeah,
guilty.
I'm a firm believer that she's the one who planted the idea of talking to that psychic,
Oh, the
and
psychic, that's right.
she turned me on to her page, her web page, and cleared her calendar for me. I
Yeah,
have a very clear line that she was desperate to contact me, and this was the only way I was going to listen.
that's right.
Maybe I was having dreams before that I wasn't remembering. I don't know, because
Right.
after my meeting with Dawn the psychic, I was having like subsequently like a lot of dreams that she was in, and then a dream of my grandfather who had predeceased my mom by about 9 years. I had never had a dream about my grandfather before, and
Right.
he, he was just watching the Yankee game on a rabbit-eared TV in a room with a ceiling fan and lots of like cedar colored paneling on the wall. And he grabbed my hand as I walked into the room, and I could feel his hand the exact way his skin felt. He always had the softest hands, and I felt, and he just walked me around him and sat me down on his left. No, yeah, his left. And we held hands and watched this like 1970 something Yankee game. We said nothing. And I was just infused with this overwhelming sense of well being and peace and love. And that was all I needed. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. It was extraordinary.
And that's a spiritual experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they happen to 40 to 50% of the population in the United States and Great Britain. But a lot of people don't talk about them for the very reason that you said people think I'm crazy.
Yeah, I wrote about them in my book because it is part of my makeup now.
Sure.
And I'm no longer an atheist. I don't exactly know what my own cosmology looks like. If I was to describe it, I don't really know, but I do know there's life after death. I do know that the purpose that we're here on this earth is to find love and give love, and that's probably just about it. And I think that that's enough. Um, and yeah, so it's amazing. Around the same time, I found a book called Proof of Heaven, which was written by a neurosurgeon in Virginia. I think his name is Eben Alexander, and
Yeah, Eben, right.
oh, Eben, yeah.
Yeah.
So he, the book. So he had a bacterial meningitis and was in a coma, and the part of his brain that was responsible for feeling and all of that was offline. They weren't sure he was going to make it. He was in the coma for a week, and he experienced heaven and love and like oneness with the universe, and in a way that was just so poetically described and so beautifully profound. And the girl who met him, this is just blows my mind, but the girl who met him at the pearly gates, so to speak, who he didn't know, but who clearly knew him, showed him, his tour guide. This is heaven, so to speak. And I don't think words were expressed. It was all just in a language far beyond our comprehension. And then when he woke up and he was recuperating, he was looking through photo albums with his sister, and he sees a picture in his mother's photo album of the girl he saw up in heaven. And it was actually a deceased older sister of his who had died in childhood, who his mother never told him about.
Yeah, because he was adopted.
Oh, is that what it was? I missed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's a great story for adoption people, because he was adopted, and he knew the adoption agency, and he wanted to meet his natural parents, and they kept stalling. And that sister had
Oh,
died, and then when they finally met him, they had a whole an album that showed. And I'm getting chills now. So
yeah.
somebody's here, but yeah, that's a great story.
Totally changed that, all of that that book and the psychic, it all happened within a few weeks in my life,
Yes.
like right after my mom died. Like I kept feeling like all of these pieces were coming together. Songs that were meaningful to me and my mom would just suddenly start playing on the radio.
Yes.
The song I sang at her wedding just sort of showed up out of nowhere. It's just amazing to me. Amazing to me.
I work with a medium in England occasionally, and she says that the spirits pick the songs.
Hmm.
And it makes sense because sometimes I've had clients who, after their loved one dies, I walked into Macy's and they're playing this, and I walked into, Starbucks and they're playing the same song, and it's my mother's favorite song, right? Who died.
Right.
And so I do believe that they do try to reach you, and they usually try to reach you through electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how they do it. And mediums and
The
psychics.
ceiling fans in our house.
Yes.
Suddenly, my daughter and I will be talking about my mom, and the ceiling fan will go on.
That's right. And lights go on and off, and
Yeah.
all kinds of things that they can play with.
Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing to me.
But it proves we have that there's another world where spirits live, and spirits are a people without physical bodies, and they can't talk, but they can send you thoughts.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's how they communicate.
I remember, got to be 2 years ago, right before the whole pandemic thing occurred. It was on. Wow. Okay. It was on my mother's anniversary, the anniversary of her death. I happened to be giving blood. And I don't know what it is about October 9th, but I just realized I gave blood again this year on the anniversary of her death. Weird. Okay. And I was sitting there, with the thing in my arm, and I was watching, they had News 12 on, and there across the screen were the words, "To the moon and back." And my mother always used to say, "I love you to the moon and back." Pretty common thing, I suppose, for a mom to say. I say it to my kids too. And it happened to be, yes, a news show about a space launch of something.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not an idiot to think that News 12 is broadcasting directly out of my mother's soul, but no. I happened to look up just as those words were flashing on the TV right in front of me while I was giving blood on the day that she died, the anniversary of her death, rather, while thinking about her. That can't be an accident.
It's a synchronicity. And Carl Jung talked about synchronicities that were only important to you, right, or me. Right. And that's how they use certain anniversaries to send us messages, and certain numbers to send us messages.
Interesting.
Any kind of symbol, just you can see a license plate that has a message on it, different letters and different numbers. And look for those, because they really are meaningful coincidences, which Jung said were synchronicities, meaning they were more important than meaningful coincidences. But in America, we understand meaningful coincidences much better.
Why do you think that is?
It's just a term that we use, because synchronicity is a Jungian term, and maybe people are getting more and more used to it because they will talk about synchronicities, especially if they've been in therapy for a while.
Yeah.
But he said, pay attention to those, He had a famous case where this woman was coming for therapy for about 1.5 years, and she wasn't doing much, he didn't think. Anyway, she came one day and she had this dream, and she's so excited about this dream. And there was this black bug in the dream. And she's telling him all about it. And he thought, wow, she's really excited today. This is good. And then it was June in Switzerland, and it was hot. So he got up to open a window. And as he opens the window, this black bug flies in on the carpet.
Wow.
And she goes, that's the bug. That's the bug was in my dream, right? Now, that would have been nice, right? However, it was from Egypt, and it was a scarab bug, and it was alive.
And why would it be in Sweden?
It was in Switzerland. Yes.
Oh, Switzerland. Sorry.
And why would it be in Switzerland? Just because it was. Now, the scarab bug is, they call it a bug for survivors because it lives in camel dung, because that's the only shade there is in the desert. So, God. They think that they're very smart bugs, right? They found the only shade there is. So anyway, he just told that story over and over again. Like everybody has their own synchronicity. And he said after that, her therapy just moved.
So was this like metaphorically for her that she was a survivor, that she would find a way to be resilient and all
I
of
guess
that?
so. I don't know that much about the story other than that story. But he said
Interesting.
pay attention in your own life and in the life of your clients
Right.
because these things happen and they are very meaningful.
Interesting. So
So
do
the
you
moon thing is very meaningful to you.
Yeah, I mean, I say it with my kids. My son, when he was little, because he's a numbers guy, added 50 million times. So I love you to the moon and back 50 million
A
times.
million times.
So that's
Okay,
just a thing we say. I mean, he's 23, my daughter's 20. We still say it to each other all the time. So
that's nice.
it like harkens back to my mom, and and the kids changed it to evolve their own thing. It's Wow. So do you blend all of this kind of stuff together when you're talking to your patients?
Yes,
So you use all sorts of psychology and parapsychology or
right. Whatever works for them.
whatever works. Wow. Wow. Yeah, I think it can be extremely helpful. I mean, I know that my own psychotherapy would not have gone as well or as quickly, or I don't think I might not have ever learned to forgive myself had I not had that experience with the psychic. I
That's
might
right.
have carried that grief and that guilt around unnecessarily forever. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Who knows?
And William
Amazing.
James, who's the father of American psychology, he studied mediums. Now, when you study William James in psych class, um, they don't talk about the mediumship necessarily. They talk about he was the father of American psychology. He wrote 2 books on psychology. All that's wonderful, but he studied mediums all the time, and he called them mental healers. He and his wife lost a son who was a toddler,
Hmm.
and at that time, the maids in the house would say, "Oh, we go to this medium, this psychic." So Mrs. James went, and then she found this one psychic, Lenora Piper, and she said, "She's really good. She talked about where our son is. I'd like you to come." So he goes because he's lost his son, and that becomes his white crow because she was a phenomenal medium. And
Huh.
they studied her for 20 some years. I mean, how long do you have to study a person to know that she's not a fraud, you know? But
Right.
that was the big deal then, that there were so many fraudulent people. That's why really mediumship has gotten a bad name. So you
Yeah.
have to go to somebody that you believe in, I believe in, go by word of mouth, and and then just see what happens for you. Because
Right.
William James said the best way to know what happens in a medium with a medium is to see one. And he's
Well,
right.
yeah, makes sense.
But
Or
how
go
many
see it for
people
yourself.
people will say, well, that my religion doesn't believe that, and my mother wouldn't let me go, and well, someday maybe you'd like to go.
Yeah. I tell this story in my class at least once a year, and last year or the year before, I can't quite remember. I had one student of mine who was very interested. Her grandmother had died. There was some very recent, very tragic death, and she retold my story to her mother, and they went to see the same psychic I saw and
Good.
got relief and connection and peace in their family. And it was just like, I had chills just thinking about it when she was telling me the story. It's pretty amazing. So how can this knowledge of the three realities help us develop our own well-being, our own peace in our own lives?
Well, I mean, I think I know I behave better because I know I'm going to go up there someday. And one of the things I've learned about the other side is like attracts like. So I want to be with people I really like,
Right.
and I want to be with honest people and people who like to read and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I try to be good. I try to be loving. And Carl Jung believed that the negative ghosts, because there are ghosts that play tricks on people, and he believed those were people, number one, who never went to the light, and also that they were people that never really completed what they were supposed to complete here. So he
Okay.
believed you had a soul purpose, and your job was to figure out what your soul purpose was, and to live it. And you had to live this life to the best of your ability. So all of that, I think, knowing that there is life after this one, and that there's supposedly Brian Weiss, who's from Red Bank, New Jersey, he wrote a book. He puts people under hypnosis, and they go back to past lives.
You think that's a thing? Can you do that?
Yeah, you can do that.
I have heard about that, past life
He's
regressions.
He's in Miami, and he has a book, Many Lives, Many Masters. You might want to read that one. It's his first book,
okay.
And I think it's the best one. And he has a woman who came from an alcoholic family who comes in, and he he put her in hypnosis and told her to go back to the origin of the problem. Now, she was afraid of elevators. She had all kinds of problems. Well, anyway, she goes back to another life. That was the origin of the problem.
Wow.
And so she tells him things, and he writes everything down, even though this is weird. And I think she even speaks in another language. I don't know if that happened the first session. But anyway, she leaves, and 2 weeks later, she comes back, and she comes in, and she says, well, I don't know what we did last time, but I'm not afraid of elevators anymore.
Huh.
Anyway, it's a great book.
So in a past life, she had a problem with an elevator and a train.
Well, no, I think she was enclosed in a cave, and they set fire in there to all these people.
Oh, that'll do it.
That's right.
That'll do
it. So anyway, in Jungian psychology, he also believed that we have more than one life, that it would take more than one life to develop a soul.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah. So I write about this in my third book, The Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal. I talk about my life and how I grew, and I talk about psychology in the beginning, and it has a lot of things in it. Not just about your astral body, but it does have that at the end. But if you want to get connected to your soul purpose, I think it's important to be able to know how to do that.
So how do we do that?
Well, let's see. One of the ways.
Sorry for the pause. My brain just went.
I know. It's a lot.
I had to process, and yeah,
it's a lot to take in, I think. Okay, so Freud believed, there was Freud and Jung, right? And Jung came out of college, and he was made an assistant of a mental hospital, which is a big job for somebody right out of college. And he was reading Freud, because Freud said if you had people lay down, they told you more. And what do we do with these people that come in other than to keep them clean and give them tea and, Right. So anyway, Freud believed in your unconscious. It was all the stuff that happened in your family, and then anything about sex. So sex was a big deal about the unconscious. So when he and Jung got together, Jung would visit him because he had more money. He would travel. Jung said the unconscious has 5 layers. The first layer is what happened to you in your life. Okay. The second layer is what happened to your parents, and how did that affect you? Okay. The third layer is what happened to your ancestors, people we don't even know, but we have their DNA. Okay. And he said you were given jobs to complete by these ancestors many times, so that genealogy was important to him. So he tried to get his clients, and he did genealogy with them.
Well, that makes sense, because I've been healing myself by doing those exact same 3 steps, going back to the... Okay.
Good. That's what I like about Jung. He makes sense.
Yeah. The
4th layer is your culture or your country. How does that affect you? Okay. The 5th layer is your self/soul. So yourself, he believes, is the part of you that really knows your possibilities. Now, the more, when you have it, he believes you have a crisis. Now, he had a crisis at 40. So he said at 40, how you handle this crisis would be to integrate your unconscious with your conscious, and you would become a whole person. And as you do that, your soul and self come up, and they tell you what it is you want. Now, that doesn't mean that it could just happen at 40, because now people can have a car accident at 18, changes their whole life. Right? So usually, though, it is some kind of crisis, and also some kind of crisis that brings somebody into therapy.
Can it happen multiple times? I mean, because I can think of certain junctures of my life where things seem to reach a crisis point and help me change paths.
That's right. Because you're looking for answers then, and you're more willing to accept things, right? Because you're in crisis. Help me.
Right.
So crisis is a good thing, really.
Right.
Um,
It's not just the closing of a door, it's an opening of opportunity and
really is.
possibility and hope. And
Yes.
yeah.
So as you go through these stages of your unconscious and developing them by bringing up the complexes. So a complex, you would have a mother complex, a father complex, an inferiority complex, all that down there. So like
Right.
there's little mountains down there. And as we talk, we bring all that up and we grow in that way. And we go out into the world. And I always tell my clients half of life is showing up. You're not going
Right.
to get any help staying in bed with the covers over your head. Nobody's knocking on your door. You
Hmm.
got to show up. And then you meet people and you go to a medium or whatever happens. You watch a TV show or you get out there in the world somehow. And that's, really important to do. So I explain all that in in my book on the soul, which I think, I don't know, is chapter 4.
Okay. Well, I will link all the books to, I mean, the links to all of your books in the show notes, so they'll all be there also for
Yeah.
contacts and websites and everything else.
But I'm giving
Oh,
you a lot right now. There's a
yeah.
lot that I'm
Yeah.
um it's a lot to be a total person.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. And I think that having a curious nature and asking questions and, like you said, going out and being in the world and meeting people makes a lot of connections and helps us build upon what we already know and fill in the gaps between the things that are missing or the things that we still have to hunt for,
Yes.
to
And the
figure out
vagus
what our mission is and to figure out what our purposes are. And
and
it's
the vagus nerve is your 10th and longest nerve in your body. So comes in at the top of your head, goes down around the amygdala, which is fight, flight, or frozen,
right.
goes down your spine into your heart, then into your stomach. So when I first started studying the vagus nerve, it was the polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, which explains that what Darwin called this the pneumogastric nerve in the 1780s or 90s, I think. Anyway, he said your stomach tells your brain danger, danger, and your heart rate goes up. So it was for panic and anxiety of my clients.
Right.
And if they could realize they have this nerve in their body and that they feel it in the gut feel of, say Freud had a famous case where a little boy was being fondled inappropriately in his father's lap. Nobody's home but he and his father. Why is daddy doing this? Mommy's going to be mad. How come this is happening to me? And so he can't fight or flee. So all he freezes and all that fear and anger goes into his cells.
Mm-hmm.
And so then something else happened in that case where a cat walked in the room. So he displaces all these feelings about his father onto a cat. And then he comes into my office at 45 and says, I don't know why, but I'm afraid of cats. So you have to help me. I don't have
Oh,
any memory of a cat ever hurting me. But, when I see a cat, danger, danger, it tells my brain and my heart rate goes up and I panic.
so how did you unravel that so that story came
Well,
out?
I didn't. That's a Freudian story, but people come
Oh,
in
oh,
like
oh.
that. People
Okay.
come in like that and they'll
Yeah.
say, I have no memory, right, of
Right.
what I'm afraid of, right? But it's like post-traumatic stress. That's what it
Sure.
is, right? So that's why this vagus nerve is just for every day for us realizing, hey, it's my nerve and I've got to calm it down. So if I'm panicked by whatever happens, I have to start to breathe. So when you breathe into the count of 4 and you breathe out for a longer out breath. So you
Okay.
breathe into 4 and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, as far as you can go out, which isn't the normal way we breathe. So you
No.
have to practice that. And if you're having trouble going to sleep, practice that because that calms this nerve down. And
Okay.
the stomach tells the brain everything's okay, everything's all right.
Right. We're safe.
We're safe.
Right.
That's the first thing you need to know about the vagus nerve. Then my spiritual part of the vagus nerve, where that is the passage for the astral body and your soul to leave. That's like, well, number 2 or 3. But the vagus nerve, you really need to be able to calm down so that you can just have a happier life. And thoughts are real things. So if you allow yourself to think anxious thoughts,
Right.
you're going to be a wreck, right?
Right.
So it's the thought, and then somebody say, well, my anxiety gets worse. No, you allow your anxiety to get worse.
Right.
So what kind of thoughts are we having? that allows that, because you're allowing it. Well, it doesn't feel like that. I know that. But if we start to change our thoughts, you'll start to realize you are allowing it.
Yeah, yesterday I had a moment very early in the morning when I first got to school, and my heart rate was elevated and I started sweating and I was very upset, and I sat at my desk and I have this little fan and had this fan on and I was just breathing like there's
Right.
nothing wrong. You're totally safe. Something triggered something. Let it go. It was a thing. It's not a thing anymore. Let it go. And it worked, and my heart rate went down and I stopped sweating and the anxiety went away and I was completely fine. Took a few
There you
minutes,
go.
but I was completely
Yeah.
fine.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's important just for the person that is listening and, wants help, with anxiety or panic.
So does meditation and obviously mindfulness connect with this
Oh, sure.
reducing the stress or the anxiety in the vagus nerve? It's all
It,
that's
it's
what
all
it's
it's all
triggering.
connected. So anything you do to calm yourself down, that's excellent.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so getting back to what we started talking about in the very beginning of this with the children of alcoholics, what kind of advice do you have? Probably could take 20 years to impart, but to any listeners who we have who were the children of addicts or alcoholics, what kinds of I don't know, support, advice, how do you, if you're just at the beginning of your healing journey, you're just sort of starting to figure out that it's up to you to unwind all of this and heal yourself, where do they begin? Where do we begin with that?
Okay, well, I think a good place to begin is to learn that you were raised with three rules: don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel.
Mm-hmm.
Because you couldn't trust the parents because they were not with it. Even the people that don't drink are usually affected by like my mother was crazy because my father was drunk again, and
Right.
she, didn't have time for the kids. So don't trust, don't talk, and don't feel. So write those down. Number one, you'd have to learn what am I feeling right now? And I might not know. So we start with feeling words. And then don't trust. You have to learn the kind of people you want to trust to be around, and maybe take some, kind of critical, guilt-ridden people out of your life. And so that you have good feelings about who you're with, and they help you have some self-esteem
Sure.
and
And
learn
to
to
not
trust
have
your.
guilt about eliminating the toxic people out
Yeah,
of your life. You just
that's right. And um and learn to talk. Now, that's kind of where the vagus nerve comes in, because if people come from, a house where there's addiction of some kind, or mental health, maybe one of their parents was schizophrenic or something, they stay home because they learn not to go out into the world and trust, right?
mm-hmm.
And so how do we go out? Then we will join groups. One of the best things, of course, for children of alcoholics is to join a group, an Al-Anon group,
Mm-hmm.
or a group for adult children from alcoholic families. And ACOA groups are wonderful. Now, they have them online now because of COVID, but I think some of them are opening up so that you could really go and meet. And some people say, well, I'd rather go online. Well, okay. So go online first and get used to being on a Zoom call, with 20 some people, and see what that's like.
Right.
And listen and try to take in and relate to the people that have the same problem that you have. And I love what Bill Wilson said when he said to go to an AA meeting. If you were an alcoholic, there'll be people there who probably will be drinking, because for an AA meeting, you only have to have the desire to stop drinking. So
Really?
some people go and they drink. So
Well, they
take
don't
what
drink
you need.
at the meeting, though.
Well, sometimes they go drunk or they smell bad or whatever.
Okay.
So take what you need and leave the rest, he would say. So
Mm-hmm.
find somebody in that meeting or on that Zoom thing that you can relate to. Leave all the negative. Don't tell
Right.
me about the negative. What did you find there that you could relate to?
Makes sense.
And then half of life is showing up. So when you show up, then, and a 12-step meeting is great, because Do you want to help with the coffee? Do you want to help with the chairs? So they give you
Hmm.
something to do,
Right.
right?
With all that
And
nervous, awkward energy. Yeah.
yeah, right, right. And then when you're looking at people, don't look into their eyes because that's very difficult. Look right here between on your top of your forehead, right above your nose. And when you look at that and you talk to people, it's not so difficult to talk to them. And they think you're looking at their eyes.
Right. Because it's right there.
That's
Right. Right.
but realize you're not alone. And
I think that's the biggest thing is to realize you're not alone and all the crazy thoughts in your head that you have, the internal monologue that you have that you berate yourself with. Everybody does the same thing.
that's right. They do. Yeah. So you have to stop doing that
Yes.
and maybe make an I am list. Okay. That's a good exercise. So you would, and it would take maybe months to make this list. So you put down words of what I am what. Now you can have a good list and a negative list. And I guarantee you, most people will give you the negative list first.
Yeah.
But no, it has to be a good list too. And then start with that and start with finding somebody you could trust and maybe go to a meeting or just go to a meeting, show up. And if you're not happy there, leave. But at least walk in and see what happens.
It's good advice. Good advice for pretty much anything, whether
It
you're
really
a
is.
child of an alcoholic or not.
That's
You
right.
know, you
And
feel
lots
like,
of people, when I first started in the 80s, when I went to that first conference
mm-hmm,
of national conference, then I came back and, there's 14 characteristics that you have coming from an alcoholic home. And people would come in after a while and say, I have those characteristics. And nobody in my family drank. Oh, good. So what happened in your family? So what we found out was that your emotional needs weren't met in this family
right.
because two people were busy about addiction, but maybe they were busy about religion or they were going to be successful. So they didn't pay attention to you.
Right. Too busy
So,
building a business, too busy.
right,
Years and years ago, I was a preschool teacher and I had one little girl. She was only 3 and she was exhibiting all sorts of problematic behaviors. And
right,
when I contacted her mom about it, it turns out that she just had given birth to 2 special needs identical twins and was spending 99% of her waking hours dealing with those twins and completely ignoring her 3-year-old. And it
right.
was already evident that there was a problem.
Yes. Right.
So,
So
I don't know what happened after
our
that.
emotional needs weren't met. And that is, the basis for most people that have problems in social situations. So you really need to get yourself out, maybe go to a church group or just walk with your neighbor once a day or every other day. Just try to do something with somebody else
Yeah.
and you'll start to feel better.
I mean, there are all sorts of art groups. I belong to
Yes.
a group called Women Sharing Art right here on Long Island, and we go on outings and we go look at art together, although I usually can't because I'm teaching, but they go to art and we have exhibits and we create art and share them and we have workshops and stuff. And I used
Right.
to belong to a community choir and it was just a bunch of random people who like to sing and we just got
Yes.
together and sang. It didn't have to solve the world's problems or anything, but just being in a group with actual other 3-dimensional live people near you changes your whole outlook on life. You feel that positive energy, especially when you're creating something like music or art or something. For me, that's like lifeblood. I feel like that just is a resurgence of connection and love and hopefulness and all of that. So,
Yes. And that's what most people need to be able to do that.
yeah. Yeah. So find something that interests you and just do it. Do it. I had a guest on a few weeks ago. Dr. Geste was talking about this, that joining groups and volunteering or being a part of a community creates compassion and empathy and wisdom within us that we need to be not happy necessarily, but to bring meaning into our lives.
Absolutely.
And it all is all part of the lovely fabric of our lives. Wow. Well, Karen, this was fabulous.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
I'm glad. I love doing this podcast, I feel like with each episode, I'm growing as a person and I'm learning so much. And I'm so grateful for the whole process of this. And thankfully, if there's one positive thing that came out of this pandemic, it's that I discovered Zoom.
Yes.
Because this wouldn't be possible.
That's
I'd
right.
have to have people into my house or find a studio. I don't even know how the logistics of this would be possible.
Right.
But I've had podcast guests who live in Australia. I mean,
Right.
France, Canada, not going to happen otherwise,
Right.
but
Right.
amazing. Well, this has been delightful. Thank you so much for your time. I will put all the links to all of your amazing things into the show notes. And so if you're not driving, you can scroll down and find all of it there. Thank you so much, Karen. This was wonderful.
Well, you're entirely welcome.
Don't go
And
anywhere.
good luck with all your work.
Oh, thank you. Don't go anywhere yet. I'm just going to end the Thank you for joining me for this episode of Permission to Heal. I hope you found it moving and inspirational. Please remember, you don't need anyone else's permission to trust and follow your heart. You have the power within you. Subscribe to Permission to Heal so you don't miss any new episodes, and please share this with your friends.